Alright, so I'm going to teach you at least what I would do at the very beginning of any given match in Hearts of Iron 4. This is mostly for newer players. I'm assuming you've done just the tutorial and like nothing else, or you've tried playing the game and you're kind of confused. Since at least that's what seems to be what most people do when they're looking at Hearts of Iron 4 tutorials. So we're just going to start out right away with talking about research slots, what you should do with them, such things like that. Whenever I first play, and whenever a lot of the people I play with first do, they immediately go to research slots. They select a technology right away. I would say that there are 2 required, 1 usually wanted, and then 1 optional spot, or 2 depending on which nation you are, that you would want to do. As a major nation, you typically get 3 or 4 research slots in the beginning. As a minor, you get 2 to 3 or so. And, well, the very first thing you want to do is either electronic, mechanical engineering, or you want to go over to the industry tab rather than the engineering tab and do basic machine tools. Now, once you're done with engineering, what I like to do is just rush down the mechanical computing line as soon as the ahead of time penalty is passed. Basically just follow up with the closest number to the left of it. So, like, radio detection, radio, mechanical computing, and electronic mechanical engineering are all 1936 tech, whereas dissymmetric radar and computing machine are both 1938. You should be able to get that. The reason why is because the computing side has research discounts. You get up to 5% less research time every single slot you do, and then also encryption and decryption are nice things to have when you're out in the field battling everybody. Decryption so you can read what they're doing, encryption so you can keep what you're doing secret and give them as least amount of information available. It's a lot more useful when you're doing multiplayer than actually doing single player, but if you have no encryption or decryption, the enemy will be able to see what you do, and the AI, if you're using the AI to help you with lines, they won't move nearly as fast. It at least seems to me. Now over on industry, what you typically always want to do is concentrated industry. The extra 10% factory output is so much more useful than bombing vulnerability, especially if you have the industry to just be able to make enough planes and not worry You always want to do concentrated industry because the plus 10% more factory output is better than the bombing vulnerability, because most of the time you're able to just, make enough planes to prevent area superiority being lost from you. Now with the extra 2 research slots that you'll have, at least as Germany or any other 4 tech nation, I typically always go construction so I can make stuff faster, and then really the 4 slots up to you, whatever you feel like you need the most. I would stay away from doctrines right away and wait till you get the discounts for your national focuses and whatever else, so they're a lot cheaper. Otherwise you're going to be waiting 297 days for the very second tier of mobile warfare doctrine. I would say that if you don't have artillery, go for that immediately. Artillery is really, really important for infantry. Tanks, they're nice, but most majors at the very least have light tank 1 and heavy tank 1. It may be worth getting the light tank 2. Support divisions are always nice and always useful to get, and as Germany at least, I'll always go support weapons 1, just because you don't have it for whatever reason. Kind of weird, considering they had MG08s in 1918 at least. Anyways, moving on to free civilian factories. The strategy here, well, basically what you're doing is you're making stuff for your nation. It is a construction tab after all. What you typically want to do here is make civilian factories till the very start of 1937. If you're in the middle of one, just finish it, that kind of thing. Or stop at about 50 or so. I noticed that there's pretty heavy diminishing returns once you have 50 consumer factories. So I'll just, at least as Germany, I'll just make 1 civilian factory in every single state that can take it. After that, what you'd want to do is once 1937 rolls around, switch to making military factories and/or naval dockyards. If you want a stronger navy as Germany, which is important to take over Britain more often than not, then you should probably make naval dockyards. But you can only make them at the very north side of Germany, that's touching the sea. So then you just kind of put your military factories everywhere else. Synthetic refineries next are. We'll give you oil and rubber. They're largely useless for democratic nations, but they are fairly useful for pretty much everybody in the Axis because they have a tough time getting rubber especially, and oil usually. Especially by the time Germany wars with the Soviet Union, and taking the Caucasus is really hard to do. Beyond that, you do have two more options that aren't available to you right now, but will be in 1940s and 1943. And that's the nuclear reactors and rocket sites. Nuclear reactors helps you make nuclear weapons. Rocket sites will help you make like the V1, the V2, as an example for like Germany. Strategic rockets are pretty useful. Well, fairly useful. Beyond that, you can also make naval bases. I don't really mess with these, as Germany at least, because they're already pretty much fine. You can make land forts. I don't mess with these as Germany because the national focuses you get as them. And you get coastal forts. Don't really mess with these either. Like, naval bases are the only things I would particularly mess with, especially if you're trying to get supply lines going better. They help relieve some of the pressure on the infrastructure and are able to pump through the ports themselves. Beyond that, there's really not a whole lot. I would say absolutely stay away from anti-air guns. They are pretty much useless. Don't even bother. But infrastructure is always useful. Air bases are always useful. Radar stations are nice, but not required. Now, moving on to your free military factories. Here, the general strategy you want behind these are support equipment never goes out of date, but infantry equipment, artillery, arguably motorized depending on what kind of army you make, but always for sure fighters are the most important things to make. Usually I would just stay away from fighters as a minor nation, but as a major nation you absolutely need as many fighters as you can possibly pump out, going as fast as possible. Beyond that, I always like to have a full line of artillery and usually about a full line of support equipment. Tanks are useful when breaking through against enemy divisions, and we're just going to move straight on to building ships. Convoys never go useless. Destroyers are the backbone of your navy, and so are your main battleships, like Battleship 1, battle cruisers, and heavy cruisers. I'll go into detail about the navy in its own separate video, because it does deserve its own separate video that can give you the idea of why destroyers are the backbone, why you typically want to make submarines, and why you always want to have a decent number of main or just battleships, or whatever major ship, main ships. I am going to skip the national focuses because they're unique to every country, so that's going to be its own video, and the division template design because that's going to be its own video also, but it should be coming in the next couple of days after this video goes live. Insufficient resources. This is the last tab I'm going to go on for this video. As Germany, you have a need for oil and rubber. As Japan, you have a need for oil and rubber. As Italy, you have a need for oil and rubber. And, well, actually, Italy just kind of needs everything. But so, basically, what you want to do here is some things to keep in mind with trading with other nations is that every time you trade for each single level, like, I'll get 5 factories, but I'll get 40 oil from Venezuela. The things you want to keep in mind about this is you are giving another nation your civilian factories. So if you're going to go to war against a nation, Netherlands, France, the UK, Poland, the Soviet Union, you typically don't want to trade with them if you can help it. If you can't help it and you have to trade with somebody in the Allies or the Comintern and you're the Axis, try to trade with somebody who's weak but has a lot of resources. An example in rubber is the Dutch East Indies. They are very weak, but they have a ton of rubber. So that's kind of basically the only strategy behind trading Really? The only things even kind of worthy of note is that it does take a couple of hours for trade to actually start, and then this will actually disappear. And I'm talking hours in game, not hours in real life. That'd be ridiculous. But that's basically all there is to do in this video besides national focuses and divisions that I said. Going to be another video probably a day or two after this video goes live. So I'll see you next time when I talk about that, and I hope you learned something.